So we're going to start building the messages screen. And as part of this, we're going to use the FlatList component to render a list of items. As you can see here on the official documentation, FlatList is fully cross-platform and it has many features. It has support for header, footer, separator, pull to refresh, scroll loading, and so on. So back to our code, let's add a new screen. We're going to call this messages screen. Now let's create a function component. Now here we want to render a flat list. So let's import flat list. Good. Now there are three props we have to set. The first one is data, which we set to an array of objects. So for now, as a temporary solution, let's create an array of objects here. Later in the future, when we connect our app to the backend, we're going to retrieve the list of messages from the backend. Okay. So I'm going to declare an array of messages. Here we're going to add an object with a few properties. ID we set to 1. Title we set to T1. Description we set to D1. And image, this is going to be the image of the user. Again, as a temporary solution, here we have to use the require function so we can load an asset statically. So we're in the screens folder. We're going to go one level up, then go to our assets and load mosh.jpg. So here's our first message. Let's duplicate this. And here we need a comma. Now for the second message, let's change the ID to 2. Let's change the title and description as well. Okay, so here we have an array of messages. Now let's set the data prop to messages. The second prop we have to set is key extractor. Here we have to pass a function that is used to extract a unique key from each object in our array. So we can pass an arrow function like message goes to. Now, what property of a message can we use to uniquely identify each message? The ID property, okay? But here we need to convert this to a string, otherwise we'll get a warning. So here's our key extractor function. And finally, the last prop we have to set is render item, which we set to a function for rendering each item. Now, let's go back to the documentation and take a look at the render item function. Look at the syntax here. Here we have object destructuring. So the parameter of the render item function is an object that has these three properties: item, index, and separators. So back to our code, we type a pair of parentheses. So here we're going to have that argument, but we're going to destructure it right away. And here we're going to pick the item property, okay? Now this goes to represent each item, we're going to use our list item component, the list item component that we built in the last section. So let's import list item. Well, VS Code didn't recognize this, so we have to manually import it on the top. So import list item from, we go up to components and load list item. Okay. Now we're going to render a list item. Now, as you remember, our list item component has three props: title, subtitle, and image. So we're going to set title to item, the title, subtitle to item, the description, and image to item, that image. Okay. Now, as a side note, maybe it would be better if we call this prop description. I think that kind of makes more sense, but this is a tiny issue. We don't have to worry about it at this point. Now let's test our application up to this point. So save the changes. Now we go to our app.js and render our new screen. So messages screen. Okay, let's see what we get. So here's our flat list. I know it looks a bit ugly. We're going to improve it over the next few videos. The first issue we have here is that our list is not in the safe area. So it's going to get covered by the status bar and the notch on iPhone. We'll fix that in the next lesson.